Professor Donald Boudreau. Am I saying that right, Professor?
Yes, you did.
Thank you. Professor of Economics and former chair of the Economics Department at George Mason University. And you were referred to us by the Mercatus Center, which says that you are a senior fellow and Nelson Getchell Chair for the study of free market capitalism. Do I have that right?
That's right.
Okay. The president last night, I was hoping that he would call income inequality the defining challenge of our time. He didn't. He mentioned the word inequality 3 times, once in relation to income inequality, although he did not even preface it with the word income. But why would you object to saying that income inequality that is right now standing at levels that we have not seen since 1929 is a bad thing?
Because I don't like raising envy into public policy. There's nothing in any theory that I know of or any ethics that I know of that says that dictates that incomes have to be equal. People make different lifestyle choices. People have different levels of luck. Demographics change. And I dispute, actually, the claim that income differences are at levels more unequal since 1929. It's true if you look at pre-tax and pre-non-cash transfers. Once you include the taxes and the transfers, then it evens out, and we're at levels of post-tax, post-transfer income levels that are much more equal than they were in the beginning of the Great Depression era.
Because in 1929 there were no food stamps, there were no welfare programs,
Medicaid,
no earned income tax credit, those kind of things.
Right.
And the top tax rate was at 25%. Well, actually, in 29 it was at 25%, and right now it's at 39%. Although most of the genuinely wealthy people pay their income taxes as at the 20% top rate as capital gains. But again, I'm not. You said you're opposed to envy. I don't think that most people who are concerned about income inequality are motivated by envy, and why would somebody be envious of somebody having $50 billion as opposed to $1 billion or as opposed to having $200 million? I mean, I look at the research that was done by Kate Pickett and Richard Wilkerson over in the UK when they published the book Why Inequality Matters, and then the more recent The Spirit Level. And what they found was that the more unequal a country was, and they looked at the 34 OECD nations, and then they looked at the 50 states in the United States, and what they found was that the more unequal the distribution of wealth was, the worse all your social indicators became. You had more teen pregnancy, you had more venereal disease, you had more mental illness, you had more homicide, you had more suicide, and the less unequal, in other words, the more equal a nation was or a state is, the better outcomes you have. You have longer lifespan, you have less teenage pregnancy, you have less drug addiction, you have longer lasting marriages. I mean, all these things. They have like 30 different social indicators that they were able to really clearly measure.
That research has been, I think, pretty justly criticized. I mean, look, numbers, you can torture the data and get them to confess almost anything you want. But that research has been subject to the criticism that they didn't get their causality right. Now, not all the things, but a lot of the things they point to are that might themselves be the cause of greater income inequality rather than the result of income differences. There was a report that I read a few days ago by Scott Winship at the Manhattan Institute, pointing out that the greatest in the United States, the greatest single indicator of lack of income mobility is not income inequality. It's whether or not you are raised in a two-parent or single-parent household. And so, we can slice and cut the data in a lot of different ways.
But that's, correlation and causation. The single-income household may well be the consequence of the poverty associated with the income inequality.
Or it could be the cause. This is the problem.
But what if it's both?
It probably is. It probably is.
Then shouldn't we do something about that? Shouldn't we try to lift those people out of poverty? If there is a circle there, if there is a cycle there that poverty produces single parent families and single parent families produce poverty, how do you break that cycle? You can't break that cycle by saying you're living in poverty, therefore.
I think the discussion about poverty should be done separately from a discussion about income inequality. That's a different discussion. We can talk about how deep poverty is and about what are the appropriate policies to handle people in.
But is not poverty a symptom of income inequality?
Not necessarily.
I lived in Europe for a year, and the countries that
have income inequality if everyone's rich, but you have really super rich people, the two are not the same.
Yeah, I know, but what I'm saying is in the countries where income inequality is quite low, in Norway, in Sweden, in Denmark, in Finland, in Germany, in France, you don't see the kind of deep poverty that we have here in the United States. You just don't see it.
But that might not be the result of. That could be the result of other factors. I don't think it's.
I think it's the result of the fact that in every single one of those countries, the top income tax rate is well over 50%.
Well, I disagree. I don't think that you make people richer by make poor people richer by taking money from the rich people and giving.
Then why is it that the Northern European countries and Australia and increasingly some of the South American countries, or parts of them, parts of Brazil, for example, as they raise taxes on the very wealthy and as they raise the floor underneath the very poor, as they strengthen the social safety net, they see improvements in all these social indicators and a decrease in single-parent families?
I haven't studied those countries, but I think you know one thing that I'm going to say, because most people on my side say it, and I think there's some validity to it. I think there's a great deal of validity to it. A lot, particularly the Scandinavian countries, number one, they're very homogeneous. They're much smaller than America. You have a very homogeneous population. Number two, those countries score on indexes of economic freedom much higher than America in many ways. They have a lot less burdensome regulation. They don't all have minimum wage legislation. And so they have higher tax rates than we do. You're certainly right about that. On other fronts, they have less intrusive governments. And so it's hard to pinpoint where the benefits are coming from, whether it's coming from the higher taxes or whether
I'm astounded to hear that. I mean, these are countries that are part of the EU. They're operating under the precautionary principle. I would love to have the levels of regulation that Norway has.
If you like a lot of regulation, then you might not. You might want to take that back, because you'd be surprised to learn the not on every,
no GMOs. Right.
What does that have to do with income inequality?
Well, it's regulation. I mean,
well, look, they have some regulations we don't have. We have some regulations they don't have, but they have. Like, for example, Sweden. Sweden has school choice. I forget which of the countries. I don't think all three, but at least one, perhaps two, have no minimum wage legislation. For example, they don't have anything equivalent to the Davis-Bacon Act.
They probably don't need it. I mean, Norway's got the equivalent of the Alaska Permanent Fund. I mean, they've got this massive pile of cash from the North Sea oil that they basically hold as a Social Security for everybody in the country.
Well, if that were a key to wealth, then some sub-Saharan Africa, then Nigeria would be wealthy too, because Nigeria has such a thing.
Well, no, they've got you've got a corrupt political system there.
You need good social institutions.
Yeah. Okay. Professor Donald Boudreau, professor of economics and former chair of the economics department at George Mason University. Interesting conversation. Thank you for dropping by today.
Thank you.
We'll be back.